The text on my mother's phone glowed in the darkness of her kitchen. Amy will never succeed as a meteorologist. Too emotional, just like her father. Handle this. I shouldn't have been snooping, but there I stood, gripping her unlocked phone, my chest tightening as I read the exchange between her and my sister. The timestamp showed 3:47 p.m., right when I was on air, delivering the severe weather update that had earned me a commendation from the station manager. I'm Amy, and at 37 I thought I'd outgrown the need for my mother's approval. Clearly I was wrong. Looking for something, my mother's voice cut through the darkness. She flicked on the lights, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the doorframe. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, more suffocating. "I was getting water," I said, setting her phone down. It lit up with a message. "And you felt entitled to read it." She moved closer, her presence filling the space between us with unspoken accusations. "Your sister's right, you know. All these years of forecasting, and you still can't predict the obvious storms coming your way." The words stung worse than I expected. "Is that why you invited everyone over tonight, to stage another intervention about my career?" "We're concerned," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Jessie mentioned you've been distant lately, spending late nights at the station, missing Faith's dance practices." My daughter's name in her mouth felt like a weapon. "Faith understands my work. She's proud. She's lonely," my mother interrupted. "And Jessie's starting to see what we've all known for years. You're not cut out for this life you've chosen." The sound of car doors slamming outside signaled the arrival of my sister and her partner. Perfect timing, as always. Zoe had mastered the art of showing up just when our mother needed backup. "There they are," my mother said, smoothing her silk blouse. "Let's try to keep tonight civil, shall we? For Faith's sake." I watched her glide toward the front door, remembering all the times I'd tried to mirror her composure, her certainty. But tonight, something shifted. The text messages weren't just opinions. They were proof of active sabotage. "Amy," Jessie's voice carried from the hallway. My husband appeared in the kitchen doorway, our teenage daughter beside him. Faith's eyes darted between us, already sensing the tension. "Mom?" Faith stepped forward. "Are you okay?" Before I could answer, my sister burst in, all designer perfume and practiced charm. "There's my favorite niece." She embraced Faith, shooting me a look that said everything our mother wouldn't say directly. "You don't deserve any of this." "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "Faith and I need to head out. There's a developing system I need to track." "On a family dinner night?" Jessie's face hardened. "Your mother spent all day cooking." "Let her go," my mother said, the victory already clear in her tone. "Some people simply aren't equipped for family life. Your father was the same way, always chasing storms instead of staying where he belonged." The mention of my father, who'd died tracking a Category 5 hurricane when I was 12, made something crystallize inside me. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw not the intimidating force of my childhood, but a woman desperate to maintain control. "You're right," I said quietly. "I am like Dad, and that terrifies you, doesn't it?" The room went silent. Faith moved closer to me, her shoulder brushing against mine in quiet solidarity. My sister's smile faltered, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of uncertainty in her eyes. "Come on, Faith," I said, taking my daughter's hand. "I'll teach you how to read Doppler patterns tonight." As we walked out, leaving behind my mother's protests and Jessie's confused calls, I heard my phone ping. A message from Roger at the station. "Major system developing. Need your eyes on this." Perfect timing. The storm I could handle. The one brewing in my family. That would take more than meteorological expertise to navigate, but for the first time in years, I felt ready for both. The station's break room felt like sanctuary after 3 hours of tracking the developing storm system. I poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one Faith had painted with lightning bolts for Mother's Day, when Rachel appeared in the doorway. "That was quite an exit you made last night," my mentor said, settling into the chair across from me. "Your mother called the station this morning." The coffee scalded my tongue. "What did she want?" "To express her concerns about your emotional stability." Rachel's fingers traced the edge of her own mug. Funny timing, considering the board just approved your promotion to lead meteorologist. She knows about the promotion. Not yet, but someone's been asking questions around the station. Your sister's partner, Garrett, stopped by yesterday, claiming to be writing a piece on women in meteorology. The pieces clicked into place. My mother's text messages, Garrett's sudden interest in my career, Jesse's distant behavior. It wasn't just criticism anymore. This was orchestrated. I should have seen this coming, I muttered. Like you should have seen your own father's death coming. Rachel's voice was gentle but firm. Amy, I never told you this, but I knew your father. We worked together on his last storm chase. He wasn't reckless or unstable. He was brilliant, just like you. My phone buzzed. A message from Jesse. Family dinner at your mother's. Non-negotiable. Zoe has news. I can't do another dinner, I said, but Rachel shook her head. Go. Show them you're not afraid. But first, you should know something about my own family. 3 hours later, I stood in my mother's dining room, Rachel's story echoing in my mind. Her brother had stolen her research, claimed it as his own, all with their mother's blessing. Sometimes, Rachel had said, family betrayal comes wrapped in good intentions. Amy, darling, you're hovering, my mother called from the head of the table. Sit down so Zoe can share her wonderful news. My sister beamed while Garrett squeezed her hand. I've been offered a position as communications director for the National Weather Service. The room spun. That was the position I'd been quietly interviewing for, the one only Rachel knew about. Isn't it perfect, my mother gushed. Zoe's PR background, combined with Garrett's connections. It's like it was meant to be. Meant to be? Faith's voice cut through the congratulations. Mom's been working toward that position for years. Faith, Jesse warned, but our daughter continued. No, I heard you all talking last week about how to redirect Mom's career, about making sure she stays local instead of taking national positions. You've been planning this for months. Garrett cleared his throat. It's not what you think, Faith. We're trying to help Amy maintain work-life balance. Right, Jesse? My husband wouldn't meet my eyes. The hours would be better locally. More time for family. More time to be controlled, you mean? Faith shot back. She turned to my mother. Grandma, tell them about the letters. What letters? I asked, watching colour drain from my mother's face. The ones from Dad, Faith said. The ones Grandma kept hidden. He wasn't chasing that hurricane for glory. He was investigating equipment failures. Equipment from a company Grandma's family owned. Silence crashed over the table. Zoe's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. You're confused, dear, my mother said, but her hands trembled. Those letters were personal, private. They were evidence, Faith countered. I found them last week when I was helping you clean the attic. Dad was going to expose the company's negligence. That's why you hate Mom's career so much. It reminds you of what really happened. I stood up slowly, pieces of a decades-old puzzle finally fitting together. That's why you pushed me toward teaching instead of meteorology. Why you fought every promotion, every advancement. You're not worried about my stability. You're worried I'll find out the truth. Amy, my mother began, but I was already moving toward the door. Faith, let's go, I called. But my daughter was ahead of me, car keys in hand. Amy, please. Jessie reached for my arm. We can talk about this. Yes, I said, we can, but not here, not now. As Faith and I drove away, my phone lit up with a message from Rachel. Board meeting tomorrow. Time to take control of your story. The storm I'd been tracking all day was nothing compared to what was coming. But this time, I had something my father never had, the truth, and I knew exactly how to use it. The board meeting ended with unanimous approval of my promotion, but Roger's expression told me something was wrong before he even opened his mouth. Your mother contacted every board member last night, he said, following me into my office. Tried to convince them you were unstable, like your father. I kept arranging papers on my desk, willing my hands to stay steady. Did she mention the equipment failure investigation? No, but Rachel did. Roger closed the door. Amy, there's more. Jesse came by the station earlier, asking about your work schedule for the past 6 months. The papers slipped from my grasp. He's building a case. For what? Custody. The word tasted bitter. My mother's convincing him I'm too focused on work, just like my father was, that Faith would be better off. A knock interrupted us. Through the glass wall, I saw Jesse standing there holding a manila envelope. "I'll give you 2 space," Roger said, but I grabbed his arm. "Stay, please." Jesse entered, his face unreadable. "We need to talk about Faith. About how you're planning to take her away." The words came out sharper than intended. About how she's been investigating your father's death behind everyone's backs. He dropped the envelope on my desk. "She found more than just letters in your mother's attic. There are photographs, equipment reports, everything your father was collecting before the hurricane." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of photos, damaged weather equipment, falsified safety reports, all bearing my mother's family company logo. "Jesse," I whispered, "did you know about this?" "Not until this morning. Your mother called, hysterical. Faith took copies of everything to a journalist." He sat heavily in the chair across from me. "Amy, she's threatening to destroy your mother's entire family legacy. Our daughter is trying to expose the truth about her grandfather's death," I corrected him. "Where is she now?" "At the house, packing." Jesse wouldn't meet my eyes. "Your mother convinced me it would be best if Faith stayed with her until things calmed down." Roger stepped forward. "That's not your decision to make. Faith is 19. "Stay out of this," Jesse snapped. "This is family business." "Family business?" I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. "Like how you and my mother have been planning to redirect my career, or how Garrett mysteriously landed Zoe that position I was pursuing. We were trying to protect you." Jesse stood up, his composure cracking. "Your father's obsession with exposing that company got him killed. Your mother couldn't bear to see history repeat itself." My phone buzzed, a text from Faith. "Mom, don't let them stop you. I found something else. Meet me at Rachel's." "You're right about one thing," I said, gathering the photos. "This is family business, and it's time to finish what Dad started." "Amy, please." Jesse reached for me. "Think about what this will do to everyone, to us." "I am thinking about us, about Faith, about every family that trusted that equipment." I moved toward the door. "Roger, I need you to pull the archived footage from the hurricane that killed my father." "Already done," he said quietly. "Rachel's been digitizing it all morning." Jesse's face darkened. "You're choosing your career over your family." "Just like he did." "No," I corrected him. "I'm choosing truth over manipulation. Faith figured that out before any of us." As I walked out, my phone buzzed again, this time from my sister. "Amy, wait, there's something you need to know about Garrett's involvement." The elevator doors opened, revealing my mother standing there, her usual composure shattered. "You can't do this," she said, stepping out. "I've spent decades protecting this family." "No, you spent decades protecting yourself, and now Faith might pay the price. Everything I did was for you girls." Her voice echoed through the hallway. "Was it?" I asked quietly. "Or was it to hide your own guilt about Dad's death?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Behind me, I heard Roger's steady footsteps, felt his quiet support as I walked past my mother into the elevator. "Amy," she called out, desperation cracking her voice. "If you do this, there's no going back." The doors began to close. "I know, Mom. That's the point." Rachel's house felt like neutral territory as I spread the documents across her dining room table. Faith sat beside me, her laptop open to a series of emails between Garrett and my mother's family company. "Look at the dates," Faith pointed. "Garrett knew about the faulty equipment investigation 3 years ago, before he even met Zoe." "He orchestrated everything," Rachel said, examining the emails. "Meeting Zoe, getting close to your mother." The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw my sister standing alone on the porch, hugging herself against the evening chill. "Should I?" Rachel asked. "Badin." I nodded. Moments later, Zoe entered, her designer confidence stripped away. "Garrett's gone," she said. He emptied our accounts this morning. Sit down, I said. There's something you need to see. As Zoe read through the evidence, her face crumpled. He used me to get to Mom's estate, to bury the investigation all over again. Not just the estate, Faith added quietly. The company's facing a class action lawsuit. Garrett was supposed to make it go away by discrediting Mom's work and keeping her focused on local forecasting. My phone buzzed, Jessie calling again. I silenced it. Mom's about to announce my position at the National Weather Service, Zoe said. It's happening tonight at the Meteorological Society dinner. Rachel straightened. The dinner where Amy's supposed to receive her leadership award. Perfect timing, I muttered. Maximum damage to my credibility. Unless... Faith's eyes lit up with a familiar determination. My father's determination. Unless we use their plan against them. A text from Roger appeared. Station manager called emergency meeting. Your mother's here with the documentation about your emotional instability, coming to warn you. They're moving faster than we thought, Rachel said, reading over my shoulder. Good. I stood up. Because so are we. Zoe, I need to know, are you with us? My sister's hands trembled as she held up her phone, showing a video. Garrett didn't know I was recording when he met with Mom last week. He admitted everything. The equipment cover-up, Dad's death, using me to control you. Send it to me, Faith said, already typing. I know exactly where to leak this. The front door burst open. Roger rushed in, breathless. Amy, they're calling an emergency board review. Jessie's testifying about your obsessive behavior regarding your father's death. Let them, I said, surprising myself with my calm. Faith, how long until that video goes public? 20 minutes. My journalism professor is reviewing it now. Zoe's phone chimed. Mom's asking where I am. The dinner starts in an hour. Tell her you'll meet her there, I said. And Zoe? Wear the green dress she bought you. She'll never suspect you're not still her perfect daughter. Amy. Roger stepped closer, his voice low. Are you sure about this? Once we start... They started this 25 years ago when they covered up Dad's death. I gathered the documents. Faith, send everything to Rachel's lawyer. Roger, I need you to do one more thing. Anything. Get me Dad's final weather report, the one they buried. It's time to forecast a different kind of storm. My phone lit up with a text from my mother. Last chance, Amy. Think about Faith's future. Faith read the message over my shoulder and took my hand. Mom, I already am thinking about my future. That's why we have to do this. Zoe stood, straightening her shoulders. I'll drive Faith home to change. We'll meet you at the dinner. As they left, Roger lingered. Your mother has half the Meteorological Society convinced you're unstable. Good, I said, watching Rachel organize the evidence. Because unstable weather patterns are my specialty. And tonight, they're about to see exactly how much damage a perfect storm can do. Rachel handed me a familiar blue dress, the one I'd worn when I received my first broadcasting award. Your father would be proud. No, I said, taking the dress. He would be justified. And soon, he will be. The sun was setting as we prepared to leave, casting long shadows across Rachel's living room. In less than 2 hours, everything would change. My mother's carefully constructed world of manipulation and control would face something she couldn't predict or manage. The truth. And this time, I had the evidence to prove it. The Meteorological Society dinner buzzed with artificial warmth as I entered, Rachel close behind me. Through the crowd, I spotted my mother at the head table, Jessie beside her. My husband's face paled when he saw me. 5 minutes until the video goes live, Roger whispered, appearing at my elbow. Faith just texted, she's in position. A champagne glass clinked. My mother stood, commanding attention with practiced ease. Before we announce our new National Weather Service appointment, I'd like to address some concerning rumors. Right on schedule, Rachel murmured. My daughter Amy has been struggling lately, my mother continued, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. As many of you know, she lost her father to his obsession with weather patterns and equipment safety. Now, she seems to be following the same destructive path. Phones throughout the room began buzzing. The video was live. Mom, Zoe's voice cut through the murmurs. She stood in her perfect green dress, holding up her phone. "I think you should watch this." The room fell silent as Garrett's voice filled the space. The equipment failure wasn't an accident. We knew the readings were wrong, but shipping delays would have cost millions. My mother's composure cracked. "This is clearly doctored." Like the maintenance reports. Faith emerged from the back carrying a familiar leather briefcase. "The ones in Grandpa's old case that you kept locked in the attic?" Jessie stood abruptly. "Faith, that's private family property." "You mean evidence," I said, finding my voice, "of negligence that killed my father and potentially countless others." The room erupted in whispers as Faith opened the briefcase, revealing stacks of documented violations and falsified safety reports. "Amy," my mother's voice sharpened, "think very carefully about what you're doing. There are consequences, like having your husband killed." Rachel stepped forward. "Or manipulating your daughter's marriage, or stealing your other daughter's career opportunities." Jesse moved towards me, his face ashen. "I didn't know. About your father, about any of it. Your mother said you were becoming unstable like him. She showed me documents." "Forged documents," Roger interrupted, holding up his tablet. "Just like the ones she submitted to the station board this morning. The timestamps don't match the metadata." My mother's perfectly manicured nails dug into the tablecloth. "Everything I did was to protect this family. To protect you, Amy. Your father's obsession with exposing the company would have destroyed us all." "No," Zoe said, moving to stand beside me. "You protected yourself, and you used us all to do it." Phones continued buzzing as the story spread. My mother's carefully constructed facade began crumbling in real time. "The National Weather Service position," I said quietly. "It was never about Zoe's qualifications. You needed someone you could control to bury the ongoing equipment issues." "Issues that still exist," Faith added, pulling up current maintenance reports on her laptop. "The same patterns Dad found 25 years ago." The room had become uncomfortably quiet. Board members exchanged worried glances. My mother's social circle began edging toward the exits. "Amy," Jessie reached for my hand. "We can handle this privately. As a family." I stepped back. That's what Mom said when Dad died, when she convinced everyone he was chasing storms instead of exposing corruption, when she used his death to control every aspect of our lives. "The company employs hundreds of people," my mother snapped. "Would you destroy all those families for revenge?" "Not revenge," I corrected her. "Justice, for Dad, for every meteorologist who relied on faulty equipment, for every forecast that could have saved lives but didn't." Faith moved closer, her father's briefcase still in her hands. "The evidence has already been sent to the proper authorities, all of it." My mother's face hardened into something I'd never seen before. Defeat. "You've destroyed everything I built." "No," Zoe said softly. "You did that yourself. With every lie, every manipulation, every time you chose power over family." The room had nearly emptied now, leaving only the core players in this family drama. Jesse stood frozen between his wife and his mother-in-law, the weight of his complicity finally visible on his face. "Amy," Roger touched my shoulder. "The station wants a statement, and the National Weather Service Board is calling." I looked at my mother, seeing her clearly for the first time. "I'll give them one, the full forecast, no matter how severe the storm." The weather conference podium felt like an execution block as I prepared to present my findings. 3 days after the Meteorological Society dinner, my mother's company had launched a full-scale media assault, painting me as an unstable woman obsessed with conspiracy theories about her father's death. 2 minutes, Roger said, adjusting the microphone. "The press is here in force." Through the audience, I spotted Jessie sitting beside Faith. My husband hadn't spoken to me since the dinner, but our daughter's unwavering support had kept him from completely disappearing. "Amy," Rachel appeared with a tablet. "They're running the story now. Your mother's interview is live." On screen, my mother sat perfectly composed in her home office. My daughter's mental health has been a family concern for years. Her father's death traumatized her, creating delusions about equipment failures and corporate cover-ups. "She's good," Zoe whispered, appearing beside me. She's making it personal, not professional. Harder to disprove. The conference moderator stepped up. Due to recent controversies, we'll be extending the Q&A portion of Dr. Amy. Actually, my mother's voice cut through the hall as she strode in. I believe I have speaking rights as a major equipment manufacturer's representative. The room erupted in whispers. I gripped the podium harder. Mom, Faith called out. You can't. I can and will, my mother interrupted. As I have documentation proving these equipment failure allegations were investigated and dismissed years ago. She produced a familiar-looking folder, identical to the one in my father's briefcase. Those are forgeries, I said, but my voice shook. Are they? My mother's smile was razor-sharp. Or are these the originals and yours the forgeries? The authorities might be interested in knowing how you acquired your supposed evidence. The whispers grew louder. I saw doubt creeping into faces that had supported me days ago. The metadata, Roger began, but my mother cut him off, can be manipulated, as any technical expert will confirm, just like weather patterns can be misinterpreted by someone desperate to prove their point. Jessie stood up. Amy, maybe we should... Listen to your husband, my mother said, before you destroy what's left of your career, and his. What does that mean? Faith demanded. My mother's smile widened. Your father's law firm represents several major meteorological equipment manufacturers. How long do you think he'll keep his partnership once his wife accuses them of negligent homicide? The room spun slightly. I hadn't known about Jesse's firm's connections. From his face, neither had he. You set that up, Zoe realized. You recommended Jesse's firm to those clients. I protected this family, my mother said, like I always have, even from themselves. Rachel stepped forward. I was there when your husband died. I saw... You saw what grief and guilt made you see, my mother cut in, just like Amy sees conspiracies instead of accepting that her father made a fatal mistake. The moderator cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a brief recess. No, I said, stronger now. I have evidence, fabricated by a grieving daughter. My mother turned to the audience. Ask yourselves, what's more likely, a decades-long corporate conspiracy, or a traumatized woman unable to accept her father's tragic error in judgment? Phones began buzzing throughout the room. Breaking news alerts flashed. Equipment company cleared in historic investigation. Questions raised about recent allegations. How? I whispered. I had 25 years to prepare for this moment, my mother said quietly. Did you really think I wouldn't be ready? Faith rushed to the podium, gripping my arm. Mom, we have the truth. We have pain, my mother corrected, and it's time to let it heal, properly this time. The room had grown unbearably quiet. Jessie wouldn't meet my eyes. Roger stood frozen by the technical booth. Even Rachel looked uncertain. Amy. My mother's voice softened to that familiar, controlling tone. Come home. Let's handle this as a family. For a moment, I was 12 again, being told my father's death was a simple accident, being shaped into someone who wouldn't ask dangerous questions. Then I saw Faith's face, my father's determination reflected in her eyes, and I remembered why I'd started this fight. No, I said, reaching for the presentation remote. I'm done letting you decide what truth this family can handle. But as I clicked the button, the screen remained dark. The backup drive was gone, and with it, everything we'd gathered. My mother's smile said it all. She'd won. Again. Or had she? The conference hall had emptied except for my mother, still standing triumphant by the podium. Faith and Zoe flanked me like guardians, while Jessie hovered uncertainly near the exit. Your father's original laptop, Roger's voice cut through the silence as he strode in, the one Rachel kept after his death. It just finished uploading 25 years of backed-up data to every major meteorological database in the country. My mother's composure cracked. That's impossible. I destroyed... The copy you knew about, Rachel interrupted, entering with a weathered leather bag. But Tom always kept backups, including one he gave me the day before he died. You've had it all this time, I whispered. Rachel nodded. waiting for the right moment, for someone strong enough to finish what he started. "It doesn't matter," my mother said, but her voice wavered. "No one will believe the insurance claims." Zoe stepped forward, holding up her phone. "The ones Garrett documented before he disappeared. He didn't just empty our accounts, Mom. He copied everything, every falsified report, every covered-up malfunction. He sent them all to me this morning." Jesse moved closer, his lawyer's instincts finally overriding his loyalty. "The firm's clients. They knew. They paid," my mother spat, "to protect their investments, to keep this family secure. To buy our silence," Faith corrected, "to keep Mom from becoming like Grandpa." "I protected you." My mother's careful mask shattered. "Your father's crusade would have destroyed everything. Our reputation, our security." "My father's crusade," I stepped toward her. "Or your father's legacy, the company he built by cutting corners, by sacrificing safety for profit." Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone. "One call and every media outlet will run the story of your mental breakdown." "Go ahead," Roger said quietly. "They're already running a different story. Live feeds from weather stations across the country showing the same equipment malfunctions Tom documented 25 years ago. Still happening, still being covered up." "You don't understand what you've done," my mother whispered. "The lawsuits, the investigations. We'll finally bring justice," I finished. "For Dad, for everyone who trusted those readings." Jesse moved to stand beside Faith. "It's over, Cheryl. The firm's already being contacted by families affected by the faulty equipment." "Families?" My mother laughed bitterly. "You think I care about strangers' families? Everything I did was for this family. For you, are you so, Amy, for your future?" "No," I said softly. "Everything you did was for control. Dad threatened that control, so you let him die. I threatened it, so you tried to destroy my career. Zoe challenged it, so you manipulated her relationship. I made you all stronger," she insisted, "protected you from your own weaknesses." "Like your father protected you?" Rachel asked, "by making you choose between your dreams and family loyalty." My mother staggered slightly. "How did you—" "The letters in the attic," Faith said. "Not just Grandpa's, your old ones too. About the scholarship you turned down, the career you gave up to protect the family name." "You didn't protect us," Zoe added. "You controlled us, like you were controlled." For the first time in my life, I saw my mother's armor completely crumble. She looked small, almost fragile, as decades of carefully constructed power dissolved. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice hollow. "The truth," I said. "All of it, in your words, about Dad, about the company, about everything." "And if I refuse, then we'll tell it without you," Jesse said. "Every detail, every manipulation, every choice that led to this moment." My mother looked at each of us, her daughters, her granddaughter, her carefully cultivated family circle, now united against her. "You'll destroy everything," she whispered. "No," I corrected her. "We'll rebuild everything. Without the lies, without the control, without you if necessary." The choice hung in the air between us, redemption or isolation, truth or pride, family or power. My mother straightened her shoulders, a ghost of her old authority returning. "You're more like him than I ever wanted to admit." "Thank you," I said and meant it. She reached for her phone one last time, but instead of calling her media contacts, she began to type. "For the record," she said quietly, "this is my official statement." The National Weather Service headquarters felt different as I walked through its doors, my father's restored research tucked under my arm. The investigation had exposed decades of negligence, leading to a complete overhaul of meteorological equipment standards. My mother's confession had made headlines, but it was her private admission, written in trembling handwriting and left on my desk, that finally broke the cycle of control she'd inherited and perpetuated. "Ready?" Faith appeared beside me, already wearing her intern badge. The National Weather Service's student program had been her idea, a way to honor her grandfather's legacy while forging her own path. Almost. I touched the nameplate on my new office door. Director of Equipment Safety and Standards, a position created in response to the scandal, designed to prevent history from repeating itself. "Mom," Faith's voice softened. "Grandma's here." My mother stood in the lobby, smaller somehow without her usual armor of perfection. 3 months of investigations and depositions had stripped away more than her social standing. They'd forced her to face the truth about herself. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, I said. "I know." She smoothed her jacket, a nervous gesture I'd never seen before the scandal. "I'm here to submit my testimony about your father's findings, and about my father's decisions." Faith touched her grandmother's arm, a small gesture of grace that still surprised me. "I'll show you to the conference room." As they walked ahead, Jessie emerged from the elevator. We'd been rebuilding slowly, learning to trust again without my mother's influence, shadowing every interaction. "Zoe called," he said. "She's starting therapy, trying to understand her part in everything. And you?" "Taking it day by day." He handed me a familiar leather bag. "Rachel thought you should have this, your father's original field kit." The weight of it felt right in my hands. "Have you heard from Roger? He accepted that position in Colorado, said something about knowing when to step back gracefully." I nodded, grateful for Roger's quiet understanding of boundaries, both professional and personal. The conference room filled quickly, board members, investigators, and in the back, Rachel, watching with quiet pride as her own journey of justice came full circle through mine. "Before we begin," my mother stood, her voice lacking its old authority, but carrying a new kind of strength. "I want to address the patterns of control and silence that allowed these issues to persist, starting with what I did to my own family." Faith squeezed my hand as my mother began to speak, not just about the equipment failures or the cover-ups, but about the generational trauma of chosen silence, of sacrificed dreams, of control disguised as protection. "We can't change the past," my mother concluded, "but we can break its hold on the future." The meeting continued, but I found myself watching Faith take notes, seeing in her the perfect blend of her grandfather's integrity and her own fierce determination to make things right. Later, standing in my new office, I unpacked my father's field kit. Inside, tucked between pages of weather data, I found a note I'd never seen before, written the day before his final storm chase. "Amy, my dear, sometimes the most accurate forecast isn't about predicting the weather, but about recognizing the patterns that keep us trapped in storms of our own making. Break the pattern. Love, Dad." A knock at my door revealed Zoe, looking uncertain but determined. The therapy session was enlightening. Mom did to us exactly what her father did to her, but we don't have to continue that legacy. "No," I agreed, "we don't." Faith appeared with the day's equipment readings, the first truly accurate data in decades. "Mom, there's a storm system developing. Want to track it together?" I looked at my sister, my daughter, and through the window, my mother sitting alone in the conference room, finally facing the consequences of generational storms. "Yes," I said, opening my father's weather journal. "Let's track it together, the right way this time." Some patterns were meant to be broken. Others, like the way Faith bent over the data with my father's focused expression, were meant to be honored and passed on. The storm was coming, but this time, we'd face it with truth as our shelter. Truth as our shelter. Truth as our shelter. Truth as our shelter. Truth as our shelter.